Everybody, welcome back to another video, and today I will be taking a break from anime what ifs, and I will be doing my version of the Fortnite storyline. Now this might be a part 1, part 2, but I'm hoping it's just part 1. So, let's start season 1 of Fortnite, original season 1, not chapter 2, season 1. Chapter 2, season 1. So, the simulation begins, the cycle, the loop of everybody, of 100 players going into a match, fighting each other, and respawning, going back to the lobby, respawning, as we all know how Fortnite goes. Now, that was all really Chapter 1 had. Chapter 2 also, not Chapter 2. Season 1. Season 2 also didn't have a lot of things. Had barely anything. That's when Season 3 came around. We noticed a blue light in the sky. As well as when weeks went by, we saw telescopes looking towards blue light, as well as some comet sights. Now, we were all thinking that Tilted Towers would be destroyed by what seemed to be a comet, as well as many meteors started raining down the island, making fights happen more often, making fights more intense. But let us continue to Season 4. In Season 4, a meteor came down. This meteor inside it had a being called the Visitor, one that is part of the Seven. An organization or the government of the island came around and it started to collect hot rocks or things from this meteor, as well as protecting meteor. Now, a movie was being filmed at this time, and a rocket was built, but the rocket was actually a real rocket, and the Visitor hijacked it, taking it over, and using hot rocks as energy for the rocket, as well as some other places getting hit by smaller meteors, such as Risky Reels and Tilted Towers and the prison. All hot rocks were transported over to the rocket ship, the rocket, which would be our first live event for Fortnite, of which somebody got the kill record in game right now by eliminating like 50-something people. That would rain down. Actually, wait 1 second. Let me pause it. And as we all know, the rocket event ensued. Now, what would come out of this event is that the rocket slowly took to the sky, as you can see now. When the rocket came up, multiple people, of course, were trying to get onto it, failing. In some matches, they tried to stop it. So it kept going up in the air until eventually started to slow down. And it kept on going, as you see here. And then it sped up, lost part of it, and then ran to the air and made a gigantic... It kept going and going and going until it eventually stopped, or in other words, it stopped and then came down. Then when it was coming down, it boosted, which you'll see here in a few seconds. Yep. So it started coming back down, as you see here, as a shining light, boosting, putting its aim and sights down on a place that we know as Tilted Towers, and a rift opened up. Now this is where it gets interesting, because after the rift opened up, another rift opened up near Moisey Myers, making the rocket go around the map, flying around, losing one of its, going into another rift, of which it also lost one of its parts at Anarchy Acres, which you will see here in a few seconds. Yep, it already lost its part in Anarchy Acres, I guess. That's when it went into the sky, causing a gigantic rift in the air. So after that happened, the map was never the same. Through the upcoming weeks, Season 5 began with new vehicles being added, of course, stuff like that, but also the rift grew bigger and bigger. And it would repeatedly keep growing bigger and bigger until eventually something happened and it turned into kind of like a purple rift. Now, each and every day it would strike lightning down on cacti that were in a circle. I'm pretty sure this went on for around a week. Until eventually, all the cactuses, so the purple thing, the sky, as you can see right there, that's the rift that changed. It was weird because all of a sudden it had like an eclipse, and it kind of like it failed in a way, with the visitor thinking that he stopped the loop, of course, being stupid, and didn't. Yep. Big lightning bolt struck down the middle. And this, as we all know, was the infamous Kevin Q's birth. Kevin being very cube, as you see here, and then that's when the rift receded and blew up. So after the rift blew up, Kevin the Cube would start traveling around the island, making kind of like hieroglyphs in a way, where there would be zero gravity effect on. And then he would eventually make his way all the way through to Tilted Towers, destroying the building that would always be destroyed, as we know, also the one that was destroyed by a meteor. And then he would make his way to Loot Lake. Once he got to Loot Lake, once he hit the water, he started to go into the water, trying to capture the middle island. And when he went to the water, he fused with it, making it bouncy water. As well as the features of Kevin Q being that if you shot him or anything too many times, he would electrocute the nearest player to him, dealing 30 damage, and also causing fall damage if they went flying. So yeah. Now we go to the beginning of Season 6. This is when Kevin the Cube became a floating island. This is the floating island of which destroyed Loot Lake, pretty much rising up after Kevin the Cube finally went to the bottom of it, rising up, creating a gigantic wind pressure around it, making people go flying up and down depending on which way they wanted. Now, the floating island would go around to each of the hieroglyphic spots that Kevin the Cube originally left, taking power from it, and making all those places float up and then turn to stone. And then when the stone fell, it would crash, with all the stones eventually being brought together where the stone next to Dusty Divot was, of which Dusty Divot, of course, was being filled in by trees now. And the organization left. Now, once it finally got back to Loot Lake, it ended up it had too much power on it. With its power, with all its power, it exploded, creating it into 3 pieces. Now that's when Fortnite was introduced. These like cube things, like shards of the cube, would spawn up, making making husks from Save the World. Now, at this time, the simulation has been going wrong. The simulation wasn't supposed to be going like this. The simulation was broken. Simulation was not supposed to be happening like this. It was going haywire. But little did the visitor know that eventually everything would change. Not in its way that it had to. So, eventually the power started to drip out of the cube into the middle of Loot Lake, where I'm pretty sure a week later, the last drop of its power dropped into the middle of the lake, with Kevin eventually spinning up. It was spinning very fast and getting faster and faster until eventually exploded, bringing us to another dimension, of which Singularity was the savior of our island in the future. She knew that it was too early for her to reveal herself, so she brought everybody to the butterfly dimension. Now this is when a butterfly rift was shown in front of everybody, and nobody knew that this was a different dimension, but this was the dimension of the 0 point, of which was probably the giant light that was in the middle. Now, when everybody went to that giant light, when everybody went to that rift, they respawned back above Loot Lake, and that's when they saw Loot Lake with Kevin Shards in the middle of it. Now, the events that are really simple to explain, I won't really show. Like, next came. So, on the island, we saw in the TVs that there is going to be there's weather broadcast going on, as well as there looking like a snowstorm heading towards our island. Now, almost a week later, season 7 began. This introduced us the first raps, of course, and stuff like that, as well as a portion of the map being covered in ice, with a few points of interest being destroyed. As of being Greasy Grove being covered by ice, being now known as Ice Lake, and Flesh Factory being destroyed and being taken over by Happy Hamlet. As well as there is a plane factory run by Sergeant Winter in the lower corner known as Frosty Flights, and the castle of the Ice King himself. Now, the Ice King's castle was completely frozen over, but because of the silent warm temperatures, it started to unthaw, showing the whole castle. And then the Ice King, once it was all shown, was shown above his castle in an orb, where days upon days, fragments of ice would go around it, as well as Ice King holding what seemed to be part of Kevin, the cube himself. Now, this is when eventually the event came, and the Ice King swung his hand around. He made a giant version of himself, swung his hand around, throwing a whole bunch of snow at the island, freezing over the whole island, making it all snow, turning its temperature back to cold, and making the ice husk come this time. Now this is when something started to unthaw in the Ice King's prison. We saw hands on shackles there, and that's when all of a sudden it broke out. We don't know what it was, but of course, little did we know, it was the Fire King. The Fire King made his way to Weeping Woods, eventually getting a whole bunch of keys and stuff, unlocking his true self, getting away all his chains, and eventually becoming the true Fire King. He melted most of the island except for most of the portion that was there originally before the Ice King had his whole event. Ice King being enraged at this, him and the Fire King had a battle. Of course, the Ice King was driven back to his corner of the map, with Season 8 beginning. Now, Season 8 is where the real storyline begins. Season 8 had the Fire King versus Ice King still, with a volcano popping up, as well as a jungle biome. So there's 3 biomes now. Well, 4 biomes. The grassland, which covered most of the map, the jungle biome, the snow biome, and the desert biome. As well as pirates eventually setting course into this island as a chest was there. The pirates reaching there, leaving their ship at Lazy Lagoon, with Lazy Links being destroyed, of course. Now, the pirates and some pirate fish sticks, of course, came out, and now we had the pirates versus the Fire King versus the Ice King. Now this would continue going on with everybody thinking that a kraken was going to come hit the island. But little did they know that that the organization was uncovering was uncovering Leaky Lake as we call it, Loot Lake, or Leaky Lake, and under it there was a vault. Now, nobody knew of this until the organization covered it. Now, this is when Thanos came back, of course, and Endgame and all that, with the organization slowly decrypting what happened and with some things like filling into it. Now, this is when we are taken to the Unvaulting event. This is when the Unvaulted event would begin, with all those power sources slowly charging down, with the middle hatchet opening up and a beam being shot in the sky, everybody looking like they took shrooms on their screen, with people gliding around it in the middle, and eventually everybody swirling around. As well as this event having capacity and glitching out, and having a lot of players not being able to see it. Now, people would eventually go into the middle of this, figuring out what happened. In Season 6, when there was the 0 point dimension, we were brought back to that dimension, with more knowledge of Singularity, seeing a helmet on her desk, as well as us being able to choose a gun back. Of course, everybody voting for the drum gun, because they're idiots. And as you can see, the 0 point was right there in the back. Us not knowing what it was, just thought it was a cool thing that Epic added in graphics. But we never thought it would be a big part of the storyline. As well as, of course, people pointing back to the drum gun, on the desk, there was a helmet for Singularity, a chair, a radio, and some other objects. A book, pencil, apple, name it. Of course. And then there's the 0 point itself, which nobody really knew what it was and didn't think much of it. Of course. But that's when you look through and then you'd see that this was the dimension that they were in before. This was the dimension of the butterfly event. But most people actually did not notice this because most of them were just going for the drum gun back because they're stupid. She couldn't vote for the tactical SMG back or the Infinity Blade, which would have been amazing and hilarious. Anyways, me by myself, I was voting for the grappler or in the TAC SMG. Anyways, so it would take a long time for them to, of course, unravel the drum gun because everybody who was in the event was voting together. But this was a big deal, seeing how it would change the Fortnite map what they chose. Like, if they brought back the Infinity Blade, the storyline could have been different. The Ice King could have rose again. We don't know for sure, but that's probably would have been the case. With the Infinity Blade, could have actually been more common to have. I wouldn't think that they would only keep one in the game again. With the drum gun almost being in the top and the shard that was holding it in cracking, breaking, with eventually it being raised almost to the top, with barely anybody voting for the planes, which is stupid to me, but barely, I bet you people were voting for Grappler's second most, maybe the Attack SMG second most. But that's when everything went down except for the except for the drum gun. With the drum gun breaking out, going into the middle, spinning around really fast, then going up in the fall. That's when everything started to shake. The 0 point malfunctioning a bit, but making everybody lift back up. Singularity also being lifted out of this without anybody knowing. That's when we came out. The 0 point shaking and everything, the drum gun being back, made the volcano wake up. Volcano magnify, having lava spill out of it, but just smoke come out. Eventually a crater came out. That's when you follow the crater and see that it was one that would hit and destroy half of Retail Row. Well, the half that's closest to the desert biome. That's when the volcanoes started to break more and more. And that's when another meteor was sent, I'm pretty sure it's a meteor, and hit the bottom of the castle, missing its shot quite a bit. And that's when finally a giant blast came out, us not knowing what this blast was, but eventually splitting up into multiple pieces, 4 pieces in fact, hitting tilted towers in all spots, destroying tilted towers, and one other one completely blowing up, and that's when we all knew that tilted towers was destroyed. With, of course, the volcano being destroyed, as well as tilted towers. Now, at this point, there's a crack in Polar Peak. Half of Retail Row was destroyed, and tilted towers was destroyed. All except for the one building that was always destroyed, that we know as No Sweat Insurance. And that's when we eventually waited, and Season 9 was introduced, with us going what seemed to be hundreds of years in the future, but was actually only around 10, with Singularity helping the island be rebuilt, with now Tilted Towers be taken over by Neo Tilted, and Mega Mall taking over Retail Row. Now, through the Singularity was known as a hero amongst the islanders. Most of the islanders not really understanding what has been happening with their island, how more unstable it's been, how the loop has been more messed with every season, more and more. And that's when eventually, of course, 2 weeks passed through the season, and that's when in Polar Peak we saw one giant eye shown. Everybody was thinking that there would be Godzilla collab or something like that with Fortnite. But little did they know that would be the Polar Peak monster. Eventually, the Polar Peak monster escaped, leaving giant footprints around the island, destroying the cable that was connecting the 0 point to Neo Tilted and the energy going through, with Neo Tilted getting lower and lower on power each week. And that's when every so often you'd see... Oh yeah, also Polar Peak was completely destroyed. Like, the castle itself was on the back of the Polar Peak monster, of course, with you seeing it every so often in the water. And, of course, the energy in Neo Tilted glowing lower and lower until eventually the event came. I know I'm going through this fast, but that's because the events are really what mostly happens, other than, like, Season X and stuff, because that is, like, mega issues. This is when the Cats vs. Doggus event would eventually come. Now, the Polar Peak monster would slowly emerge out, the ugly beast it is would emerge out, destroying a few trees here and there when it's going up. Climbing up, and it cannot cause a lot of changes to the map because of the fact that the World Cup was going up, so yeah. It destroying, it making a gigantic ring circle, destroying trees around it. With it, making a few bursts in the ground, and also destroying one building that was right next to it, leaving the same amount of chests, of course, because you can't destroy it. That's somebody's land spot, probably. And that's when the mecha that was being built in the volcano would emerge out, powering up by Singularity, who was inside it, and it coming out onto the lava, it turning around, and letting out the monster that was trying to take the 0 point, a whole bunch of missiles towards it. The missiles hitting the monster, getting faster the closer it got, destroying Polar Peak that was on its back, the monster trying to block it. With the monster now angry at it, the robot or the mecha, or Catus, I'm pretty sure, shooting blue missiles at it, just dealing more damage towards it, with a whole bunch of warning signs throughout the map. Of course, Doggus, or the Polar Peak monster, was mostly unfazed by this, but injured here and there, with it shooting a green beam, or what I think is an acid beam, towards the mecha team leader, hurting it in the chest. It's starting to malfunction. The mecha launching towards Polar Peak Monster, grabbing it by its chest and throwing it into the water. Now this is when everything got quiet, too quiet that we thought. That's when eventually we saw a pink body. The mecha was coming out of water. Everybody thinking that the mecha was done when it reached land, with heroic music playing, and that's when, all of a sudden, out of the water, the Polar Peak Monster jumps on its back, grabbing it by its back, destroying its jets. And that's when the monster would grab its arm and bite it, and then the mecha going into a circle-like transformation, losing its arm, but throwing the Polar Peak Monster on the ground. The mecha being powered down, with Singularity losing control, it falling to the ground. Singularity seeing no more choice, with her mecha almost dying, with the trouble of everything that's going on right now. She grabbed into the vault, taking the 0 point out, and crushing it, powering it up to help her. That's when the Polar Peak Monster would jump towards her, and she would turn around, smashing it with the 0 point in her hand. That's when she would lift up her statue, which was a sword, of which I guess that Singularity probably had implanted. So grabbing the sword up and locking on, everything being fine, then all the power of the 0 point being transferred into the sword. That's when the Polar Peak Monster and the sword would collide, with the Polar Peak Monster being stabbed through the head, all of its energy being distributed upon the land, with a sword through its head, with Singularity doing an emote, and that's when the mecha team leader would eventually lift off into space with Singularity going. Now, throughout the upcoming days, the 0 point would keep on getting unstable, with it now being above ground, everybody recognizing it from what it was before. It getting unstable, more cracks going into it, more and more and more, until eventually, that's when eventually 0 Point's leader, or 0 Point, would break so much it would create a giant explosion, transporting our Jonesy, who is iconic, of course, into a dimension of which the visitor was just transported in. Of course, a few things from the past would come back. We would see alternate dimensions, kind of certain things that are happening. Some things from the past, like the butterfly event, the Christmas season, everything. We'd see a few new faces, alternate things, like alternate people, Tower Timeline. We'd see Season 8, Season 9, of course, a funny montage of Peely, and that's when we would get to Season X, with Jonesy landing and a giant meteor being frozen in time. Sorry. And that's when you would go to the Fortnite map. You would see Dusty Depot and the old OG factories were added back, as well as there being a rift zone now, with Neo Tilted losing a lot of energy, the rift zone, the 0 Point oscillator exploding but being frozen in time, same with the meteor. And that's when we would see the scientists escaping the meteor. Us not knowing really what the meteor was, but realizing that the meteor itself, the meteor was frozen in time. Remember the meteor from Season 4, how it crashed on the island, but everything being reversed in time, and then being paused. An alternate universe being collided with ours. Many alternate universes being collided with ours. And that's when each week, eventually, the visitor and the scientists, both being returned, would go through turning Neo-Tilted into a Wild West area known as Tilted Town, turning Mega Mall back to Retail Row, all except at the time the husks, and changing places like the Frozen Lake back to Greasy Grove, all except it had a taco effect, with the alternate universe having not Dirt Burger but tacos there, with Paradise Palms being, with the desert, with the Pueblo, I'm pretty sure you call it, town being changed to a collaboration of Borderlands, and as well as another one that I can give you is Starry Suburbs returning to one town that was at season 0, and having an effect where stars would rain down. And something like Paradise Palms would be changed into a mix between Moisey Myers and Paradise Palms, being Paradise Palms with all the buildings, but having Moisey Meyer features of it, like water, and you could change into props by crouching. And each week, the 0 point would become more and more unstable, because time reframing itself with the paradigm being introduced. And now, that's when we get an explanation of what's been going on in Season X, with all the time being frozen, everything being out of order, everybody not really understanding what's happening. Only the visitors and the higher-ups of the island understanding, with the organization trying to interfere with the visitors, with the 7, them trying to destroy them, messing up time even more, destroying some of the devices that the visitor and the scientists have made. The one that was supposed to change the soccer stadium into I don't know what, the organization messed with it, changing it into just a pile of nothing, with glitch consumables being there. Everything was glitched now. The whole loop was destroyed, as I will show you what the 7 have said. What the 7 said. 7 was attempting. It's very risky. As you can see at the bottom. What that showed us is that the visitor thought that all these events that were happening were interfering rather than pushing the island forward, and he thought that the only way to destroy the loop was to be outside the loop. But then he realized that you have to be in the loop itself to destroy it, with him saying that the device must be made inside the loop. The device being from Chapter 2, Season 2. But I will get to that eventually. With him saying once the countdown turns to 0, the loop must be contained. The 0 point must be contained. With us now knowing the Season X event, which I will show you. And pretty much what that was showing was the countdown hit 0, with the visitor shooting a rocket into the air, with multiple more rockets, all of them from the 7, being shot through, then going around through multiple circles, creating rifts, eventually rift opening up behind the meteor. All of the 7 were going faster and faster, hoping to create this pretty much like loop going from behind the meteor to in front of it, and repeatedly going back and forth until they got faster and faster. Once the momentum was so fast, they made the meteor itself go into the rift. The rift being spawned above the 0 point, with another rift being spawned above the 0 point, with the visitor himself going in, destroying the 0 point, making himself go back into the loop, as well as the other 7 guiding the meteor down, dashed the meteor down, then leaving the island with the meteor being so strong that it went and crashed into the 0 point, creating a black hole, destroying everything but Kevin the Cube. Here we saw the 3 superpowers of the island, the 3 main natural causes for the island's loop to stop. Kevin staying alive and denying being destroyed by the 0 point. The meteor crashing into the 0 point, and creating the 0 point being created into a black hole. And then that's where the whole island was destroyed. The servers were down. The loop was destroyed for 2 days, but the loop was tamed by the black hole. Servers being run down for 2 days until eventually Chapter 2 Season 1 began. Now, in Chapter 2 Season 1, we were introduced to a group called Ego. Now, Ego themselves were sent by what seemed to be the 7 to this new island to have everybody from the old island to be made here. So they came to this island, but there were already some inhabitants of this island, them being called Alter, with Chaos Agent himself creating some alters to their ego, some alter egos. So they were pretty much the same as the crew. Remedy had Toxin, Remedy being a healer, Toxin being a toxicator. Ripley being Slurp, Sludge being Sludge. Let's see. Journey being a traveler. Some other stuff like that. All that. So they had their whole war with there being a third group called the Agency. Them being more like a standby, alter ego, but the Agency being the winners of this battle for the reason of them just getting a whole bunch of information, as well as a message playing to Midas. A message from what seemed to have been what he thought was weird. Midas, who I believe is the visitor. You see, the visitor, when he went to the 0 point, was brought back into the loop, becoming what he thought would be just as new as the others. But he became Midas. Why I believe that? My reasons. Because of the Chapter 2 Season 2 event, which I will get to. With Midas hearing this, thinks that he must destroy the loop, with him going on to make his plan. So the Agency took an uprising, and this is when Chapter 2 Season 2 began, with there not being a live event for Season 1, Chapter 2, except for collaboration. So, what would happen is that the Agency would take an uprising with its agents with 7 new locations being made, all with contact the agency and having agents at them. With their 2 agents not having anywhere to go, I'm pretty sure that they were 2. The 2 agents being Agent Peely and Maya. Agent Peely and Maya creating a call against Midas would quickly reveal to everybody what he was doing, but nobody really believing him yet. So, this is when each agent would choose Shadow or Ghost, with Peely taking out both Shadow and Ghost, and Maya staying out of the whole thing. So, Brutus would choose Shadow. Tiantina would choose Shadow. So, when Brutus chose Shadow, the grotto was taken over by Shadow. When Tiantina chose Shadow, the rig was destroyed, the oil rig. So, next would be Meowscles. Meowscles took the side of Shadow, but when this happened, the Merc with the Mouth himself came, Deadpool, and took over the Meowscles yacht, becoming Deadpool's yacht. But that would mean Meowscles was transported to the box factory, which would then be ruled by Shadow, but Shadow not really having use for it, just let Meowscles live there. Next would be Sky, who would choose Ghost. Now, with that, a prison was made to cover the shark, and the prison would hold multiple people, with the Golden King Oro being eventually found. Now, Oro had a golden power, which he would bestow upon, let's say, 7 people. One of those people being Midas and a few others. Now, he already took out the few others, but at this point, Shadow themselves were being ruled by Chaos Agent. But Midas bring up a deal with Chaos Agent, saying that he wouldn't join Shadow, because Chaos Agent himself had a few issues going on. Fusion was rising. Fusion hadn't risen yet for reasons being that he wanted to keep himself a secret. Fusion having the golden power. Oro wanting Fusion and Midas to fight out. With Midas taking 5 of the golden power to himself, of course, with his. So he has 6 people's golden power. Oro having all 7. Midas tried to overthrow Oro for reasons. Because Midas had a very tragic thing happen to him. But Midas also being the visitor remembers of what happened. A visitor always having the golden touch power, but never really using it, except for once when he accidentally turned his daughter gold. That's when he would set the path to 7, and forgetting it, of course. So this is when, this is where Chaos Agent Midas would team up against Fusion. Fusion making an uprising and taking over Shadow. Now, when this happened, the Ghost was completely on top of it, with Midas seemingly taking the role of Midas being on the Ghost side. So Ghost would attack Shadow. Now, this long battle would feud out, but eventually what would happen is that Midas would win against Fusion, with Chaos Agent being killed in the process. Now, when Midas took his golden power, Midas was powerful enough that his whole body turned gold. And at this point of time, something bad happened. This is when Midas was able to ungoldify his daughter, who was named Jules. Now, Jules was building something for Midas. Jules, being a master mechanic, was building a device for Midas. The device eventually gaining more and more power, connecting to more and more people, gaining more energy. That's when eventually the Chapter 2 Season 2 live event would happen, which would be the peak of the storyline so far, I'm pretty sure. So this is when the Chapter 2 Season 2 event would begin, with the countdown above the agency stopping. The device being made course, by Jules. And I'll just let you watch. So in that little message, you heard Midas command, go. That's all I'm saying, I'm pretty sure. Oh, it's raining right now. Cool. Okay, so let's stop it here. So, first thing you saw was Midas saying go, with the with the device activating and blowing up the agency. So far, what the device did was push away the storm, because the storm is also part of the loop, so of course trying to destroy the loop. With Loop starting to get disassembled, they were teleported to where we are now. I'll let this continue. I'll explain it while we go for now. So, what would happen is that you'd get into first person mode. With Loop being destroyed, you'd be teleported to an office, but eventually being teleported back to see the 0 point still going on and affecting the storm. The storm pushing its way back towards you. The storm going haywire, but still pushing back, fighting against the device. Everything turning dark. The storm activating, going haywire. With this not supposed to happen on the Epic servers, the characters of the island weren't supposed to break the loop. Now, Agent Jonesy is going to be referring the Epic. The storm is acting up, pushing back against it. With at once, the 0 point is now creating even more power. Midas pushing us harder and harder by the second. With the storm being pushed back again, it being contained. The loop is being contained now, and the loop is being destroyed by Midas. Or the visitor. as I could call him. So all of a sudden, yep, the storm starts turning orange, and it's because it's being contained. Midas pushing harder and harder, but not pushing his hardest, not seeing the point yet. With the with the device turning orange and leaving. So far, it being destroyed the storm. I don't think that this should be the end of the event yet. No. Yeah, it is. No, it's not. Yes, it is. Are you sure this was the end of the event? Whatever. We haven't met Agent Jonesy yet. So no, it's not. So yeah, Midas pushed his hardest and did it. Yeah, the Epic Games centers were getting messed up with everything being destroyed and the loop being destroyed so far. With Epic needing to add in something. Exactly. As he said, it was connected to the loop. And that's when Epic needed to add in something that would be stable for the storm, adding a giant wall of water being created as a storm. With the yacht being transported to the top. Everything so far is transported to the top, with us seeing our first showcase of sharks. And that's when all of a sudden everything would start acting up again. With that giant wall of water being more unstable than the storm, it just being temporary. With us being teleported back to Jonesy's office. They had to create the wall of water for the loop to stabilize. That's when Jonesy sees Midas up there. You might think it was you, but it was really Midas. They only made it so I could see the experience, I'm pretty sure. So that's when you're teleported back. It was the loop being destroyed, but then the loop being back to contained with the storm turning into the ocean. That's going to be the end of this video. I'm just going to be explaining that. Thank you for watching, and cheers, fellas.